Once upon a time, there was a woman named Susan Powell. She was the kind of person who remembered your birthday, who offered to babysit without being asked, who smiled with her whole face. She had dreams of a long, happy life, raising her boys, growing old with someone who truly loved her, and building something beautiful from her faith and hard work. In West Valley City, Utah, she lived with her husband Josh and their 2 young sons, Charlie and Braden. Susan believed in love, but more than that, she believed in fighting for it. And she believed she could fix what was broken. She tried, every day, to make the best of a marriage that had turned into something she never expected. Josh Powell had once seemed like a dream. Intelligent, articulate, charming. They met in 2000 and married quickly, swept up in youthful optimism and religious devotion. But that warmth faded fast. Behind closed doors, Josh grew cold and calculating. He controlled the finances, forcing Susan to beg for grocery money. He discouraged her from seeing friends, mocked her for practicing her faith, and slowly isolated her until the walls of their home began to feel like a trap. Susan wrote in her private journal that she didn't feel safe, that she feared what Josh might do if he ever felt like he was losing control. But she stayed, for the children, for her vows, and for the fragile hope that maybe he would change. Deep down, though, she knew better. So she started preparing. Susan made a secret video documenting the contents of their home. She photographed their belongings, recorded her voice, and quietly left a trail behind. In one haunting clip, she walked through the house, her voice steady but low. "If something happens to me," she said into the camera, "look at Josh." Then one winter morning, Susan vanished. It was December 7th, 2009, a Monday. Susan didn't show up to work. Her co-workers immediately knew something was wrong. She was reliable, punctual. She would never just disappear. Her friends called her phone over and over. No answer. Her daycare provider panicked when no one came to pick up the boys. That's when police were called to the Powell residence. They found the front door locked and no one home. But Susan's purse, wallet, and cell phone were still inside. Her coat was hanging by the door. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs she'd packed anything. The house felt paused, frozen mid-sentence. Something was off. In the living room, there was a freshly cleaned spot on the carpet with industrial fans set up around it. Josh would later claim he'd spilled juice. Hours passed before Josh finally returned home, with Charlie and Braden. When police asked where he'd been, he looked them in the eye and said he had taken the boys camping. At midnight, in sub-zero temperatures, during a snowstorm, on a workday. They'd roasted marshmallows, he said, in the Utah desert at midnight. Investigators were stunned. The story was nonsensical, but Josh was calm, too calm. There were no signs of worry, no urgency to find his wife. When they asked if he would take a lie detector test, he refused. He lawyered up almost immediately and ceased cooperation. Then evidence began to surface. Susan's blood was found on a tile in the closet. Forensics revealed DNA from an unidentified male mixed with hers. In the minivan, they found her phone, hidden, powered off. Neighbors reported odd behavior from Josh in the days before her disappearance. He'd been cleaning the garage obsessively, moving things late at night. But with no body and no eyewitness, prosecutors couldn't file charges. As the investigation dragged on, attention shifted to someone else, Josh's father, Susan Powell. And that's when things took an even darker turn. Stephen had developed a twisted obsession with Susan. He filmed her without her knowledge, collected her used personal items, and kept thousands of images. Many voyeuristic, some taken through windows, some focused on her feet and legs. In his journals, he described his fantasies about her in vivid, grotesque detail. "I am falling deeper in love with Susan every day," one entry read. "I fantasize about her constantly." When police raided Stephen's home, they found child pornography alongside his Susan collection. He was arrested and sentenced to prison. But the horror didn't stop there. This bizarre fixation began to cast a new light on Josh, who had grown up in Stephen's warped world. Meanwhile, Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, were becoming more vocal. They pleaded with the public, with law enforcement, with the courts. They begged Josh to talk, but he remained silent, unbothered. In the absence of answers, a fog of rumors, online speculation, and media frenzy surrounded the case. The public latched on, some out of morbid curiosity, others out of righteous anger. Vigils were held, flyers were posted. Susan's face became known nationwide, but the case refused to break open. Then, nearly 2 years after Susan vanished, Josh lost custody of his children. A judge ruled that due to his refusal to cooperate and the arrest of his father, Charlie and Braden would be placed with their maternal grandparents. Josh was allowed limited supervised visitation. That's when the boys started speaking. Charlie, now 5, began telling disturbing stories. He said that Mommy had gone camping with them that night, but didn't come back. He drew pictures of a car with a trunk and a body inside. He talked about a mine. Police turned their attention to abandoned mine shafts in Utah, many near places Josh had worked. They searched dozens. They found bones, debris, even what appeared to be stained clothing. But none of it led to Susan. At the same time, the Powell family saga began to consume national attention. News outlets replayed interviews, court footage, 911 calls. Susan's video, the one where she said, "Look at Josh," went viral. Online sleuths dug into every corner of the Powell family's history, unearthing old photos, property records, and chilling web searches. Still, Susan remained missing, and Josh knew it was only a matter of time. On February 5, 2012, Josh Powell woke up knowing exactly what he was going to do. He made a batch of pancakes, emailed his attorney a brief note. "I'm sorry, goodbye." Then he set his house in Graham, Washington, for death. That day, the social worker assigned to supervise Josh's visits, Elizabeth Griffin Hall, arrived at the home with Charlie and Braden. The boys rushed to the door. Josh opened it, pulled them inside, and slammed it shut in her face. Elizabeth banged on the door, screamed his name, then called 911. "I'm terrified," she said. "I smell gasoline. I think he's going to hurt them." She was right. In the minutes that followed, Josh attacked his sons with a hatchet. Then he ignited the gasoline he had poured throughout the house. The explosion could be heard for miles. The fire consumed everything, fast, hot, intentional. When responders entered what was left of the home, they found the remains. Josh, Charlie, Braden. In the weeks that followed, investigators pieced together his final days. He had written goodbye emails, donated his son's toys to Goodwill, withdrawn cash, deleted browser histories full of child pornography and how to commit murder searches. He had been planning this. The public reacted with collective horror. Susan's story had already become a national obsession, but now it was a national tragedy. People wept for Charlie and Braden. They lit candles. They demanded reform. Susan's parents launched a crusade for legal change, working to pass Charlie and Braden's law, aiming to give courts more power to block visitations in high-risk domestic violence cases. Chuck Cox, Susan's father, never stopped searching for his daughter. He joined excavation teams in Utah, scoured desert caves, spent thousands of dollars on private investigations, but he never found her. He died in 2019 without answers. Susan's mother, Judy, still holds out hope that one day Susan will be brought home. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to Susan Powell, but the story she left behind, the journal entries, the whispered fears, the video where she begged the world to look at her husband, tell us all we need to know. Susan Powell knew she was in danger. She left the clues. We just didn't follow them fast enough. And Josh Powell, he didn't just want to take lives, he wanted to erase them, to burn everything so thoroughly that there would be no one left to tell the story. But he failed. because Susan's voice still echoes. In the media, in courtrooms, in legislation, in the minds of every person who hears her story and wonders, how could this happen? "If something happens to me," she said, "look at Josh." We did. But by the time we did, it was already too late.